Like any other year, 2024 has been a mixed bag for producers across the Northwest. Some crops have flourished and enjoyed a great season, while others have had a variety of challenges. Let's take a big picture look at what's going on in the Gem State this morning. Joining us on the PNW Ag Network hotline is Brian Searle, president of the Idaho Farm Bureau Federation. And Brian, thanks so much for the time. In your assessment, how are things going right now for Idaho farmers?
Well, I wish sales were like the weather that's been this last summer, really hot and dry and moving fast. But Idaho agriculture with the nation is really struggling, all prices across the board. I'm really not aware of anything that is really profitable at the moment. Seems like we've just got our challenges with prices in every arena, and it's a challenge.
Brian, in your assessment, what is the bigger challenge? And this might be a chicken and egg kind of argument, pardon the pun on that one. Is it the low prices farmers are getting for their commodities? Is it the high input costs? Is a little of both?
You know, it's both. And you ask kind of the bigger picture. I guess my mind goes to, I think one of the biggest things that we're facing, we could handle higher input costs if we were getting returns, but we are not exporting. And as we look at the deficit, that continues just to grow wider and wider at a rapid pace and has for the last couple of years. And it feels like in the nation we have not addressed or done anything to help us. So we know we have to export, and when we're importing heavier than we're exporting, it's a serious problem.
Brian, can you explain to our non-farm listeners out there how important trade is to agriculture in Idaho? Because I don't know that everybody appreciates how much Idaho produces and how much of that leaves the state.
So I would just take potatoes, for example. I'm a potato farmer, and we lead the nation in potato production. We're number 3 in milk production. And we couldn't even begin to consume a very small percentage of what we produce. And it's quality, and across the board, we're high producers in all the other commodities, livestock arena, as well. And so we have perfect growing soils. We have rangelands. We just have a lot of that in our favor. But the challenge is we have to export it. We cannot consume but a small percentage of what we grow. So that is critical for us as farmers and ranchers.
In your assessment, and I definitely do not want to get down any sort of political rabbit trail or anything like that, do you think the United States has done enough over the last couple of years, the last couple of administrations, to really promote trade of American products, Idaho and the entire country, overseas?
I think we could do a lot better. I've sat in meetings and I've heard conversations, and I hear words like, well, we're going to try. We're thinking about trade. We're thinking about what to do. And when you've got the ambassador of trade making comments, and again, we don't need to get in political, but those comments that are said out there, and there's many more, are not helping us. We have to aggressively be out to doing everything we can to market our products and to, continue to export. So lots of room, in my opinion, to do better in that arena.
Brian, let's transition a little bit. When the spring transitioned to summer, things looked beautiful across Idaho. And then as the summer wore on, things really started to dry out, and then the wildfire season hit. What sort of impact have these wildfires had on Idaho's ag industry?
Well, I think the smoke, everybody has an opinion, but when you have smoke-filled skies day after day after day, it doesn't do well for my lungs. How does that plant or that animal, how do they really do well in that type of an environment? So truly the wildfires, which is another subject of just mismanaging our forests for so many years that they're just out there, and the fuel load is so heavy in our forests that a lightning strike, they're just out of control. So I believe it's affected, obviously, our crops. To what extent, I don't know, but I know I live in eastern Idaho, and I'm just hearing on grain, for example, grain harvest it's getting closer to the end, and nobody's bragging about it's the best crop I've ever seen. So it's had to affect that with the heat and the wildfires that obviously didn't help. And we're seeing that probably in other commodity as well.
Brian, along those lines, do you think more can be done, whether at the federal level or maybe bring it to the state and local level, to encourage grazing out on public lands to try to get rid of some of that fire fuel before it becomes an issue?
You know, when you think about the state of Idaho, it's 67% owned by the federal government, so the federal lands, and then you've got a 5 or 6% that's owned by the state. I think we would do a great job with the 28%, but the other, absolutely, I think that there definitely needs to be better management that goes on to reduce that. We need to thin our forests, and some of that has started back up, but for years there, due to a spotted owl situation and other situations, it just shut our forests down, which just let them grow and get out of control. And so now, people are saying, well, it's too bad we got fires, but in my mind, it's too bad we allowed that fuel load. And when we can graze, that brings that fuel load down to a place where you see where land is grazed and it doesn't burn. Or it's not grazed, it burns. And that's something I think that people need to understand, that you got to get rid of the risk, the fuel load that's out there.
Brian Searle, president of the Idaho Farm Bureau Federation, thanks so much for joining us right here on the PNW Ag Network.